Hey everyone, we are just getting set up. All the fun of starting a webinar, of course. Just checking, can everyone hear me okay? There is a chat bar on the side here where you'll be able to send in questions and chat with us throughout the presentation. Just let me know if you guys can hear me okay. All right, just going to talk y'all through the basics of how to apply and at least get some information on the Restaurant Revitalization Act. It's really time sensitive, so we're going to start there. And then as they work through some of the technical difficulties, we'll get Victor into the Q&A where you'll still be able to answer, he'll still be able to answer your questions, and we'll have a really robust conversation around how people can access funding, what the application process is like, finding the SBA office in your town. So first, for my restaurant folks, food truck folks, taproom managers, brewery owners, anyone who is working in the food and beverage space that has an establishment that is serving food and beverage, including my caterers out there, which I know I've got a couple caterers on this call, you guys qualify for these funds. And I'm going to walk you exactly through how to apply for them. If you have not already, I'm going to be really quick to catch us up on time. So $28.6 billion in grants, which means that's free money. You're not going to have to pay this back, was allocated, and the portal to apply opened on May 3rd. To access that portal, you go to sba.gov/restaurants. When you get to that page, you will see a place to register your business and you will see a place to apply for funds. You must register your business first. Now, when they first rolled this out, they were trying to make you get like a federal SAMS number and a DUNS number, and there was a ton of paperwork and red tape. SBA cut that all out, recognizing that restaurant owners don't have time for that. We got a lot going on in the world right now, and we're just trying to feed people, build our community, and we just need some help. So all of that has been eliminated. It is an incredibly simple process to apply. So you're going to go to, write this down, sba.gov/restaurants. Now, when you get there, they're going to tell you after you register, which is very quick, there is a priority period for who is going to get access to these funds first, and they do expect that the funds will run out. That doesn't mean that only the people in the priority processing are going to get the money up front. This could go to anyone. It is meant to be equitable. The first 21 days, with recognition for the fact that these folks really missed out on the first round of CARES Act funding that former President Trump had signed in, and the first PPP rounds. A lot of the people in these groups did not get access to those funds, so this is a catch-up for those people. The first 21 days, they're going to prioritize the applications of women-owned businesses, veteran-owned, or socially or economically disadvantaged. Now, what does that mean? It can mean anything. It could mean that you are a cafe or restaurant owner who is living with a disability. It could be that you are in a city that has been determined a food desert. It could be that you are experiencing some sort of economic disadvantage.
Good morning, V.
Hey, is he there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we got him. Perfect. So I was giving them the rundown on Restaurant Revitalization Act, and to keep everyone caught up, we're going to skip right into it. They now know where to go, Victor, and welcome. And they know that the first 21 days is priority to women, veteran-owned, or self-identified socioeconomically disadvantaged folks. Talk to me more about where they go from there, what they can expect to get out of Restaurant Revitalization Fund.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank everybody for your patience. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties with the presentation me getting on, but I do thank everyone for their patience. And V, going back to what you're asking, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is a really good program that SBA is launching, as you probably mentioned already. It was launched on Monday. The fund itself is not necessarily a grant, and it's not a loan either. It is funding that's going to be given to all businesses that are in the food industry. And what the good thing about this is that the industries that are involved or that qualify or that are eligible for this program are very wide and broad. There are some few intricate things when it comes to the eligibility, which we'll cover those here in a bit. But more importantly is it's a two-step process. And we'll be covering that here in a bit as we go. Now, as you see on the screen here, the American Rescue Plan Act appropriated $28.6 billion for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And what that means is we want to get everybody in as quickly as possible, only because we don't know how long the $28.6 billion is going to last. More importantly, as everybody has probably heard, the PPP already ran out of funding. We anticipated it to close at the end of May, but we ran out of funding 30 days prior. So it's very important that we try to get everybody in registered and then do the submission of the application, which we'll cover here in a bit. Last but not least, the funds must be used by March 11, 2023, meaning that if you do receive these funds, you do have until March 11, 2023 to use it all. In order for you to continue to keep the funding without any repayback or any type of other type of audit for the program. Next slide, please. So the eligible industries or the eligible programs that we're going to discuss here today are going to be those that are in the restaurant industry, and this is all types of restaurants. Food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, lounges, taverns, snack and non-alcoholic beverage bars such as coffee shops and ice cream shops. And now this is where the biggest question that we always receive and always hear, what if I'm a bakery, but I do wholesale, or I work through a wholesaler distributor for my products? Well, we want to make sure that in order for this bakery or the brew pub, as you see any of those ones with the asterisks next to it, you do have to have at least 33% of your total gross receipts going to direct public sales. So on the bakery, if I do have a storefront, at least 33% of my total gross receipts must be coming in through the storefront. And the rest can come in through the wholesaler distributor type of a project or program or operational strategy that I have for the rest of my bakery. So it's very, very important that if you're going to be falling into one of these categories, that you look at your total gross receipts and you look at the calculations from there. And we'll be talking about calculations and documentations as we move along through this presentation. Brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms also qualify for this program. Breweries, microbreweries, wineries, distilleries in licensed facilities or premises of beverage alcohol producers where the public may taste, sample, or purchase products. We get a lot of this, especially on the breweries and the wineries, where they have tasting rooms where people can go and do the tasting and then purchase the product. Again, 33% of the gross receipts must be done to the public, not to the wholesaler or distributor. And of course, other similar places of business which public or patrons assemble for primary purpose of serving food or drink. As far as the sales and what numbers we're going to be looking at, the primary document that we're going to be looking at is going to be your tax returns for 2019. We do recognize that not all businesses have yet filed their 2020 tax returns, so we will be looking at the 2019. If you do have the 2020, we'll be asking for that as we move along. Next slide, please. So as far as the entities are concerned that aren't eligible for this program, state and local government operated businesses, as of March 13, 2020, owner operates more than 20 locations. Now, this is very, very important for those business owners or corporations or co-ops or conglomerates that have more than 20 locations, regardless if those businesses are in the same type of industry, have different names or different EINs. We're looking at the total amount of locations per business entity, not necessarily per industry or location geographically. The other industries that are, or businesses that are not eligible for this are those that have a pending application or have received a Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, SVOG for short. Those grant applications are still currently open. They're still accepting grant applications for that program. But if you're a business that has applied to this program or is currently pending or has received this, you will not be eligible for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Very, very important. Also, publicly traded company don't qualify or is permanently closed. If you are temporarily closed due to the COVID restrictions or local restrictions in the area that you're in, you can still qualify for this program. The ones that we're looking at as non-eligible are permanently closed, meaning your doors are shut. You're no longer conducting business, you're no longer cooking, you're no longer serving. Those are the ones that are no longer eligible for the program.
And Victor, hold on 1 second there, because there
Sure.
are some folks on the call who have permanently closed a business and are potentially reopening another one. Don't worry, we have something for you too later in the webinar. Victor's going to talk about other options within the SBA, even if this one in particular does not apply to you.
Yes, that is correct. Nonprofit organizations, again, don't qualify, but we're looking at for-profit organizations for this particular program, as we're going to be looking for your tax returns on this one. And last but not least, is not eligible for funding at least $1,000. Again, there's a lot of businesses that were impacted, but did not take a significant impact, because a lot of restaurants or a lot of the businesses in the food industry or catering industry moved from in-house sales, dining indoors, dining outdoors, to takeout. And a lot of businesses didn't really get affected that much. So what we want to make sure is that you do qualify for a funding of at least $1,000. And we'll talk about the funding limits for this program here in a bit. Next slide, please. So the funding program and the amounts are for $5 million per location, not to exceed 10 million total, or any affiliated businesses. As I mentioned in the previous slide, if you do have multiple businesses, you can qualify for this program. The maximum amount of business locations, again, regardless if they're in the same type of industry, regardless if they're the same type of restaurant, regardless if they're in different locations geographically. If you have 20 or more locations, you do not qualify. However, if you have 20 or less locations, 19, 18, or 5, or 2, or 1, the maximum that you can receive total for all locations will be 10 million for the applicant itself, again, including any affiliated businesses. The minimum award is $1,000, which is why it's very important that if you do qualify for at least $1,000, then the minimum award will be $1,000, and then it goes up from that point forward. Next slide, please. As far as the entities, can we go back one more? One more forward. Oh, okay, perfect, thank you. As far as the requirements for documentation, social security numbers, if you're a sole proprietor, individual contractor, and things like that, everybody qualifies. We'll be talking about the entities that qualify in the next slide. But the good thing about this program, unlike the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant, as many of you probably really heard, you had to get a DUNS number, you had to get a cage number, you had to register in SAM, and there was a big process prior to you applying for the SVOG grant. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, this is not necessarily considered a grant. It is not necessarily considered a loan either. It's just funding. So because of the way that it's written, you do not have to do the same process in order for you to do the application for this program. So you do not need to have a DUNS number, you do not need to have a cage number, and you do not need to register with SAM. We will be accepting valid unexpired ITINs as well. These ITINs are individual taxpayer identification number. If you do have one, you definitely qualify. You just got to make sure that it's currently active and unexpired, and you can check that at the irs.gov web portal. And last but not least, if you have any questions on ITINs, please feel free to give us a call at the customer service line, and which we'll be showing you in the next few slides. Going on to the customer service line, I will emphasize that the customer service line via phone number and email are the best way to communicate for any type of assistance or questions regarding the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. The district offices at the SBA, including the SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers, they don't all necessarily have the information for your questions or have the ability to assist you in completing the application, but the customer service folks via email or phone number can assist you with the application process, how to fill it out, and things like that. Next slide, please. As far as the types of organization structures that qualify for this program, C corporations, S corporations, partnerships, LLCs, sole proprietors, self-employed, independent contractors, tribal-owned businesses, LLCs, taxed as S corps or sole proprietors are also eligible. As far as B corporations, you have to be either S corp or C corp on the application, depending on how you are taxed. My recommendation and the recommendation of the SBA is to please talk to your tax professional if you do not know how your organization is being taxed. But if you're organized under a C Corp, S Corp, partnerships, and any of these structures, you qualify and eligible for the RRF. Next slide, please. Franchises, if we do have any franchisees or franchisors on the webinar here today, just want to let you know that the concern operating as a franchise and meeting all other program requirements are eligible. However, the franchise itself must be registered and on an SBA franchise directory. Unfortunately, not all franchises are on our directory, so it's very important if you're not on our directory to give us a call, contact the SBA and see how we can get you on the directory so you can qualify for the program. As far as the location eligibility, you still fall under that criteria. So if you're a franchisor and you want to apply for the RRF, if you have 20 or more locations, you will not be eligible. And the same thing for the franchisees, because I do know that franchisees sometimes purchase territories from the franchisors. If you fall under the 20 or more locations, you are not going to be eligible for the program either. Next slide, please. Bankruptcy is something that we gather a lot of questions for, and this is what the permanently closed description is, and as far as bankruptcy is concerned. You are not eligible, again, for this particular program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, is one, you're permanently closed. Two, you filed a Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy, or filed a Chapter 7, 11, 12, or 13, but is not under an approved plan of reorganization. In other words, if you did file bankruptcy, but you have a plan of reorganization or restructure, you still qualify. It are only those that file Chapter 7, 11, 12, and 13 that are going to be liquidating, completely removing all assets, selling all assets, paying off all that, or whatever the case may be for that particular chapter filing, then you would not qualify. So it's very important that if you did file bankruptcy, you check with your attorney, or you check with your filer, or check with the court as to how you filed your bankruptcy. Again, if you do have a plan of reorganization, you can still qualify for this program. Going to permanently closed, the description for it does not include businesses who are temporarily closed. Again, if you're still closed, you're only doing outside dining but not doing indoor dining, you're still considered open. However, if those businesses are doing takeout only, you're still temporarily closed because you're not doing any indoor or outdoor seating, but you're still doing to-go. You would be considered a temporarily closed due to local restrictions or pandemic reasons. But again, there's a lot of businesses, especially in the brewery areas or distilleries or wineries that I know have not opened any operations to the public. And so it's right now, if you fall under that category, you're still open, you're just temporarily closed due to the pandemic or other reasons or local restrictions. Next slide, please. Again, affiliates and affiliations, this is just going towards the 20 or more locations. Very, very important. If you do have any affiliates that own or operate more than 20 locations, regardless whether the business operates under different names or different types of businesses, are not eligible for RRF. As I mentioned, if I have 3 restaurants under my S corporation, for example, I have 3 restaurants, or and I have a production company, and I have 15 other breweries, for example, nationwide, whatever the case may be. I do not qualify for the restaurants or the breweries because I have that manufacturing facility that takes me over the 20 or more location limit. So we are looking at affiliates, again, as I mentioned, they do not necessarily have to fall under the food industry. So it's very, very important that you do look at when you're looking at your businesses if you have more than one location. Again, here's another example. You own 16 dry cleaners and 5 restaurants. That puts your business at 21 locations, which means your business is not eligible for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, even though you have 5 restaurants. So it's very important that we look at that. Each place where the applicant or affiliates conduct sales from a permanent structure is considered a location. So the question here is, well, Victor, I'm a caterer and I work out of my house. What would be my primary location or my corporate office? It would be your home. Again, if the applicant or affiliates conduct sales for multiple businesses with multiple food stands, food trucks, carts, the physical location is where the business is headquartered, as I mentioned. It can be where a permanent structure is. 5 food trucks will have 1 location. A caterer will have 1 location. Food trucks in particular will have the commissary which they're attached to or a restaurant which they're attached to. That's not necessarily your headquarters. So the headquarters is where the administration comes out of, especially for food trucks, caterers, food stands, and any type of those businesses that are mobile. Your headquarters will probably be your home if you're working primarily out of there. But again, we're looking at affiliates, very important that we look into that. If you do have more than one business under that same structure, we will take those into consideration, whether or not they're restaurant related or any other industry. So it's very important that we start looking at those numbers. Next slide, please.
And Victor, I want to just interrupt for 1 second because we only have about 5 minutes left to the lecture
Sure.
before we move it to the panel. So we might have to move into like a little bit more of a high level for the folks at home so that we can make sure we get to the farmer pieces as well.
Absolutely. If you want to skip slides over to the calculations, please.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right there, if we go to calculation 1. We're going to do three calculations. We'll make it quick. They're very, very easy. And if you have any questions, again, call the number and we'll go to that slide here in a bit. Applicants in operation prior to or January 1st, 2019. This is the document we're going to need from you, your 2019 gross receipts, minus your 2020 gross receipts, minus PPP loan amounts. One of the things that we skipped over, if you did receive a PPP loan, we will have to deduct that from the total amount of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. We will verify that information, so if you do receive it, please let us know. Otherwise, we're going to find out anyway, right? Next slide. Calculation number 2 are for those businesses that began operations partially through 2019. We will be looking for your average 2019 monthly gross receipts times 12 minus your 2020 gross receipts minus your PPP loan amounts. Again, this is for those applicants that started partially through 2019. Next slide, please. And calculation number 3, applicants that began operations between January 1st, 2020 and March 10, 2021, but the applicants have not yet opened, but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11, 2021. We will need your total amount spent in eligible expenses between February 15, 2020, March 11, 2021, minus your 2020 and 2021 gross receipts, minus your PPP loan amount. So this is what we will need. Next slide, please. So it's very, very easy. The calculation number 4, this is for multiple locations. If you do fall under this location, or I'm sorry, this particular situation, your calculation is going to be a little different, but we're going to be using an aggregate amount based on the amount of locations that you have. Next slide, please. And that's it, pretty much. What we will need as far as documentation, very simple, very easy. We're going to need your your tax filings for 2019, your 2020. Make sure you have your profit and loss statements. Make sure if you do have profit and loss statements, try to get those verified and signed off by your CPA or accountant. If you do those on your own, you can pull those off of your POS system if you have a POS system. If you do it by hand manually, we will require for you to verify. But we will be more than happy to take any reports that you have from your POS system, regardless if you're using Square, if you're using Apple, if you're using any other type of a POS system. As far as application and processing, the website's very, very simple, restaurants.sba.gov. That's where you go in to register, and that's where you go in to do your application. And more importantly, how long does it take? 14 days. So the sooner, the better. B, thank you very much. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. So that is incredible. So now the portal is open right now, so we want to make sure that folks go today to apply. And even if you're not in that first 21 day priority group, still submit your application now, because you'll be first in line when they get to the next groups. You don't need to wait 21 days before you can start your registration and get your application going. Now, we went in detail through the Restaurant Revitalization Act because there's the most information available on that one. There are a couple other programs that we're going to kind of go through and review, and I'm going to invite the panelists to join me on screen right now to talk from, a first-person perspective about what it's been like out there for our friends in agriculture, for our friends in nonprofit structure trying to build back better, and from restaurant owner Josh Kulp, who is coming to us from Chicago. So some of the other things we're going to talk about next are Emergency Relief for Farmers of Color Act, which was put forth by Senator Warnock from Georgia, the freshman senator. And it's been approved, but it hasn't been authorized how people access those funds. We're going to talk about that. We heard recently that the PPP funds have run out. It's about 3 weeks to a month before it was supposed to. Now, Victor, I heard that there is still some money set aside for women and minority-owned businesses, so I want to ask you about that. And then partnerships with the USDA, and where folks in the farming and agriculture world can start to access some money, or at least know where to set your Google alerts so when these acts get funded, you two are right on the front in line for applications. So,
hey, my office, will you make sure
it's clean?
Oh, somebody's on. Okay. So, Shauna, I'm not sure if we're able to see everyone's webcam or if people can join. There we go. There's Vanessa. Hello. Welcome. Might be me and Vanessa looking at each other. I don't know.
Hey.
I'm here. V,
Yes.
this is Josh from Honey
Hey,
Butter. I'm
Josh.
hiding because my 2.5-year-old we're hoping is going to nap. So
Oh my God, I love it. Okay. Well, the voice of Josh.
I will try to appear momentarily.
No problem. And Adrian, can you turn
Hey.
your webcam on?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You
Okay,
can
but you
click
see
that
me.
button at the top, share your webcam.
You know what? It's not sharing, so I am going to fix this technology real quick. And
Go to webinar, stock is dropping. Zoom is looking better and better. All right, well, I'm gonna get started with the conversation while y'all figure out if you can get the webcams to join. If not, it'll be me and Vanessa looking at each other and answering some questions. So first, our guests today are Vanessa Polanco from the Young Farmers Association. We have Josh Kulp, the co-owner of Honey Butter Fried Chicken in Chicago, and Adrian Lipscombe from the 40 Acres Project and the Uptowne Cafe. So we've got a mix of farm folks, restaurant folks, and of course we have the SBA friend Victor here to grill on how we get this money. So question to the panel. This is the second time that a round of relief funding is going to be coming out in a short period of time, within a year. This is the most amount of funding that has truly ever come from the government with this level of effort to try and get in the hands of women and marginalized communities to bring equity to how the government is funding essentially the infrastructure of this country. So I wanted to ask, starting off, if you got PPP or CARES Act money last year and you're expecting to get more funding from the American Rescue Act, how will you spend it differently? Like, what was your CARES Act experience like versus what you're where you think it'd be best spent today? And maybe Vanessa, will start with you.
Sure, definitely. I would say that the new monies are still welcome to a lot of our farmers. Many of our farmers did not apply in the first rounds of monies last year because they thought they were not eligible. So a lot of what we have been doing is actually educating a lot of our members, telling them that you are eligible to apply. This funding is available to you. You can qualify. It's not that heavy paperwork and burdensome. So a lot of our members are still definitely in the what we call like this pivoting that happened a lot last year, and a lot of them are still trying to reimagine how their operations are going to be working on what we call like this half-ass situation, because because right now it's like we're still in a pandemic, but many things are going back to normal. So there's still a lot of transition happening. For example, a lot of our farmers who have wholesale accounts, those wholesale accounts have not come back yet. But many of our farmers still have to focus on direct market sales, like farmers market, farm stands, and community supported agricultures. So we still need those funds. We still need that money, and our farmers will definitely find ways to utilize them, because all the different spendings that they have last year, they still have a lot of costs to bear, and also they just thought they were not eligible for this funding, and most of the funding that was available last year was not really suited for young farmers, farmers of color, and farmers who just had smaller operations. So there's definitely a transition right now when we are seeing more availability for people to tap into this funding availability.
Yeah, and I know we were talking when we were doing the panel prep, you were saying that a lot of folks will think about SBA farming or think about going for a grant and think they need to go for millions of dollars because they need to buy land and do all this. But your folks were saying, like, we need money for tables. We need money for like grocery bags to go to the farmer's market.
That's right, and for boxes to pack the CSAs, and for things like, I think I told you, we have someone that literally had to throw a driveway on their farm for the first time ever because they have people coming to pick up their produce right at the farm. So definitely, and I think something that we definitely saw a lot of last year, we did a pilot program which funding from Chiprote, about where we gave $5,000 to 50 farmers, and we were able to see even that small amount of money could do to farmers of color in a year where they really needed it. So that's what we're telling our farmers. It doesn't matter if you may think you may not be eligible, the operation may not get as much money. Any amount of funding will definitely help your operation.
Yeah, of course, right? And nobody knows how to stretch a dollar quite like a farmer in this world. Like, but for me, I was like, that's great to hear, because I often don't think of that either. Like, think about your core expenses. You need to be able to buy tables. You need to pay the driveway to have access to your farm. Like the things that go beyond expansion or land buying or the huge big equipment purchases that we think of. There's the everyday purchases that are actually making the difference in how people are able to thrive in their business. And Adrian, I want to come to you with the same question, because I know over the last 15 months, not only are you running a cafe that's, you know, has a feeling of responsibility to that community to keep people going and keep that up and employ folks, but you also founded the 40 Acres Project, which aims to help Black farmers buy back their land. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Shauna, just unmute her. There you go.
All right, technology, right?
Oh,
So I had
man, I know.
one thing wasn't working, so I was like, let me, I was like, V's gonna kill me. Let me make sure this is right. So thank you very much for inviting me. So, being a restaurant owner during COVID was just difficult to begin with, but also tacking on and feeling as a chef a responsibility to our farmers was another thing, because especially if you were focusing or you focus and work with farmers, we had a responsibility. We already made plans of purchasing, working out through what our year was going to look like with them. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and we're sheltered in place. So I really, really thought about what's happening with our farmers. Luckily enough, things like during the pandemic, bringing the consumer closer to the farmer made it very possible, and was very lucky that our farmers were able to work within our community and cut out the middleman to be able to sell a lot of these goods. But also where I'm located at, there is no Black farmers. So there's for BIPOC farmers where I'm located at, it's very slim to none. So being able to really understand the history of what Black farmers did or what Black people did for the agricultural industry in the US is astronomical, and a lot of that is invisible, or it's not told anymore, or the history has just been buried, let alone the land grabs, the violence that has happened to farmers for these land grabs, and then even the mistrust in the government. So there's a lot of issues that are within working and agriculture as a Black person that makes it difficult to move forward. So, you know, I'm very excited about this grant, but you also are very wary about things that happen with this grant, or what's going to happen with this grant, because it's a lot, it's not a lot of money. I want to get that clear. It's not even enough to really be a forgiveness, or we can't call it reparations, but, and I wouldn't call it reparations because there's millions and billions and trillions of more dollars that are needed to suffice, you know, equality among agriculture. But one thing definitely for sure, it's a stepping stone, right? It's I would say it's a lot of money right now in a short period of time that has to be something that has to be done with that. And so, like, for my restaurant, I did not get the PPP. I didn't even apply for the PPP. I read the PPP, and I said to myself, this isn't for me. And with a lot of people I know that did get the PPP, there's a lot of mental anguish. There's a lot of I know it should be forgiven, but is it going to be forgiven? There's a lot of turmoil that's around that. But for me, we didn't do it. But with the farming and what I'm trying to do with 40 acres is that preservation, one, of our history for Black farmers, but also how, and I asked this question, and I asked it to USDA, I asked it to everybody I talked to, is how do you create a successful Black farmer? How do you bring in a farmer today to make sure that they are successful in the agriculture economy right now? And that's going to take more than the money that's in the relief.
Right, because it's not just about like, okay, we're going to even the score, give you enough money to buy some land. It's about restoring the history. It's about creating a prosperous future. And there's a lot more investment that goes into those soft parts of this fix or this change than just here's a John Deere and a piece of land, right? Like there's so much more.
You know, I mean, if you go back and look at 40 acres and a mule, it was given land and physically given a mule, but that was also taken away and taken back within like a couple years. But you know, today it's a lot more. It's more, you have the land, great, I'm able to purchase land. It is the tools, it is the education, it is the connections into the agricultural the agriculture economy. Also, how do you sell these products? What is your soil like? What is your water like? What is your topography? Do you have, you know, your watershed? What can you do onto that land? Do you live on it? Do you not live on it? And you know, today a lot of farmers, all farmers, you know, one person's usually working the farm, and somebody's working in the city and has a 9-to-5 job during the week. And the main question that ends up being is how do you create a successful farmer? You know, they are kind of our stepping stone in the United States for food. I mean, any other way you see it, it's coming from a farm, it's coming from the ground to your plate. Be it if it's coming and they're opening a box and they're setting it and warming it up in the microwave, to be it that you met your farmer, you went to that farmland, you smelled it, you tasted, you brought it, and you put it to your plate. So they're, like I said, the stepping stone, the pivotal part of our food industry, and we need to give them as much support as possible, or we're gonna have to all put gardens in our backyard and just be eating at home.
I know. And one thing you brought up earlier when you were talking, and every time you talk, I have like 57 pages of notes when we do these, and I'm coming to Josh next. One of the things that has been hot in the news is this idea of a labor shortage, of people not wanting to work hard, of people making more money on employment, this sort of villainization of the worker and the avenues that affords capitalism and exploitation to take something like that and be like, well, there's all these jobs and nobody's working and everybody's lazy and the workers don't like, you know, they're just this, that, and the other. And one thing I love about Josh and Honey Butter Fried Chicken is you have such a reputation for building workers' equity within your restaurant and within the operations and the events and the activism that you do. Tell me about how is worker equity playing into people being able to get out of the recession and build back their business outside of just the funding, even just attracting a workforce?
Yeah, well, and thank you for having me as well. I think, you know, the goal for us since we opened Honey Butter is to really try to create good, long-lasting, solid jobs, the jobs that we sort of imagine and fantasize used to exist. I don't know if they ever really did, but I think what we think about is how do we create jobs that are careers for people, that can support families, that pay well, and that can provide all those sorts of benefits that individuals and families need. I mean, I think the pandemic really revealed the terrible weakness of our economy and our system when, you know, suddenly we closed last year for 4 months, and all of our employees, you know, health benefits were dependent upon their employer who had just closed in a pandemic. So, you know, I think for us, it's, as we think about incentivizing people in terms of creating those good positions, it's just pushing every day to make it even better, make it even stronger, make it even more stable, and also to, you know, for those of us that work in the industry and are thinking about working in the industry, you know, it can be a very physically taxing, emotionally taxing place to be. One of the things the pandemic has really opened our, you know, a lot of restaurateurs' eyes to is that there are different ways to operate your business. You know, we became much more focused in the pandemic. You know, we would always be kind of saying yes to everything, taking on so many projects, and I think running ourselves ragged, running our team ragged. And I think what we've really realized is, like, let's hone in a little bit. Let's think as much as we can about what that extra piece might add to the workload and to the day-to-day struggle of working in restaurants, and be mindful of that. So, you know, we've really been able to, I feel like, improve the work-life balance. You know, it's like the think, and I try to say this, you know, and it might be wishful, optimistic thinking, but, you know, we are alive at work. I hate that idea of work-life as though they're separate. Work should be ideally a place where you're feeling nourished and supported and uplifted and able to grow. So for us, the pandemic has helped us reshape some of that. Yeah, so incentivizing employees, we've had 40 employees. We've had 40 employees through the entirety of the pandemic, and we still have 40 employees. We haven't been in a position yet, knock on wood, where we're trying to rehire as we come out of the pandemic. And I think, you know, we know that there are people who have long dreamed of different careers, different opportunities, and we know there's going to be a lot of change sort of happening in the near term, and we're starting to prepare for that. But we're hoping that offering the good pay, the good benefits, and just a workplace that actually considers people's needs is a good incentive. So we'll see.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, Josh. And one thing I heard years ago from your partner, Christine, was when I asked her the same question on a panel, she was like, you just can't skip that step. You can't skip the treating your workers well. You can't skip the understanding that you are alive at work. You can't skip that step of caring for the people who are caring for your guests and the people that you're choosing to spend, you know, most of your day with. You can't skip that step and expect to have the same level of success and the same level of return. And I think that that's such a powerful, simple way to say it, right?
Absolutely.
Now, last year, we know that the supply chain broke down, and from the farm and restaurant perspective, there was a disconnect on, you know, Cisco and US Foods weren't necessarily jumping in to help as much as we would have hoped. They certainly did as much as, you know, made sense for the structure of business that they have. But you did see a return to people really trying to, from the restaurant perspective, create new local connections, not just because they wanted to help their local farmer out of charity, because they couldn't get a truck to bring them the food that they used to be able to get. And I wanted to just get your guys' perspective on how can we build more on that, building more on this idea of a hyper-local food chain that is truly connected because somebody's willing to take their dad's pickup truck down to the farmer and pick up, you know, 6 cases of squash, and then go to the next one and pick up apples and go to the next one, and kind of gathering resources locally, both out of community and out of necessity. Did we build a better supply chain in some ways? And Vanessa, I'm going to come to you for that.
Yeah, definitely something I'm thinking a lot about right now, especially right now. There's a call from the Department of Agriculture that everyone is in welcome to submit comments on how we can build more resilience into the food supply chain. Because we definitely learned a lot of lessons during COVID, but we hopefully need to implement some of those lessons. So when it happens again, or something like this happens again, we will have better infrastructure ready to. And what we saw, many farmers were able to adapt quickly, especially those farmers who really had that connection to feeding the community, working with local and regional markets who were thinking about building regional food hubs and aggregators. Those were the ones who were able to adapt really easy when big supermarkets could not, when big corporations could not. Because that's one of the abilities of having a diversified food supply chain. We have resilience, we have flexibility, and we have different actors. And when I think about how young farmers and farmers of color were able to do like delivery for the first time from door to door, were to able to sell the farmers market for the first time, or they would literally start a CSA with no notice, 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the growing season. That's really crazy. But it also shows you that we have the capacity to build a stronger and more resilient food chains. We just don't have the willingness. And now that we have this shock to the system, how we say in resilience, we need to start thinking that this is the way a lot of things should have done. And right now, there's a lot of proposals at the legislative level and the administrative level thinking about this. What are the lessons that we learned that we could implement? And some of them relate to the food supply chain, especially around meat and around safety to workers, especially when we think about meat and pack workers and farm workers, but also thinking about where's the funding that we should be paying attention. Just this week, I think yesterday, the Department of Agriculture allocated another $92 million for local and regional programming in agriculture, because we know that's the kind of funding that we need. Because when our communities were going hungry, we were not thinking about money coming from the sea. We were looking at our local food bank. We were looking at our local farmers and our local farmers markets. So we definitely need to do more investing and more resource allocation towards our local and regional operators and actors. And those are and you know who those are. You are all here in this call. But definitely start thinking more about those local and regional state-based solutions so we can build a stronger food system.
And there's so much opportunity in that, right? As well. We have a lot of students on the call today too, recent graduates of Cornell or Cal Polytech, like who were in agriculture and farming. And I know when I was young in my food career, I had this idea of like the stoic old man farmer, just like happy to be here. And then as I actually worked in it, I was like, it is not like that at all. It is not like that. And unfortunately, the media doesn't represent farming and agriculture and innovation quite the way that we're able to see it when you're actually in it. So I'm wondering, with the price of food always being kind of an issue for both restaurants and farmers, this idea of cheap food, making it as much as possible for as little money as possible, with this breakdown in the supply chain and the opportunity for new innovation and the opportunity for people to have a little bit more expendable income to buy a better product because they're cooking more at home, they're ordering out less, or they're getting restaurant food and they understand that that is coming at a premium, because now that you've had to cook 7 days a week when we were at the height of pandemic, you know how much work goes into that and you cannot forget that. Do you think that price sensitivity is an opportunity for us, or do you think that folks are trying to spend even less money than they were before?
I can tell you, we need to remember that how much certain agricultural products cost is also a policy decision. Remember that we invest more in what we usually call raw crops and commodities. That's why we heavily subsidize things like corn, soy, and other things. But things like diversified agricultural products, or just like lettuces and cucumbers, are more expensive because we don't federally subsidize them as much. So when I think about why those things are more pricey, and obviously the cost of that, and we know accounting the labor that goes into that, we should definitely be asking to restructuring how we invest in our food and agriculture items. Obviously, food in food items is important to us, especially fruits and vegetables. We should be demanding there's more investment on those products instead of the ones that may be more shelf stable, that may be more easy to produce, but are the ones that are actually feeding us the way we need to be fed in a nutritious and healthy way. And I think speaking of prices, I just saw this report from Bloomberg yesterday saying that we actually are the highest price point on food that we have been in 10 years. And it's also because of the things you are saying are related to labor. We definitely seeing a labor decline in the United States in food and agriculture. And that is what the reason why organizations like Migrant Farmers, the National Young Farmers Coalition, wants to turn more people to agriculture. So we have more of that diversified food production in the country. Because we need more people in agriculture, so also we can keep those prices accessible and also affordable in our communities.
Exactly. I know, and with the policy and political turnover that there's been recently, there was a complaint that there's not enough migrant farmers, and that's why the cost of food is going up. And it's like, so sorry that you can't exploit the same groups of people that you were before. You didn't want to allow people into the country, and now we don't want to allow them to work. And now they're saying, like, I'm not doing this work like this. Like, there needs to be a change. So I think there is such an opportunity, especially for young people, to demand farmers' rights, for not only the migrant farmers and the people who are working to harvest the food that we're eating, but also to have those subsidies. As you pointed out, the USDA has one of the largest budgets. It's right up there with the military, to make sure that we're growing more of the food that we want to eat in this country, and we're not importing more than 50% of our consumables. So we've got the land, we've got the space. We definitely need to be investing in that and advocating for that. That's an excellent point. Going back to restaurants for a quick second and looping Victor from the SBA in for a little bit of hot seat time. One of the things that we had talked about was the fact that there is support coming to people who are working and operating still, but to a lot of folks who did have to close their business, and oftentimes it wasn't their choice. What opportunities are there for somebody who lost everything and is trying to get their feet back on the ground?
Okay, I was on mute. Sorry about that. Yes, so the programs that we do have are very, very important to assist any type of business for that matter. The way we're helping restaurants to get their feedback on the ground is depending on the program that you choose to go for. Right now, as we mentioned, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that one is the most recent one. We do have an economic injury disaster loan. That program is specifically for those businesses that were affected by any type of disaster, whether it been the COVID-19, whether it have been through droughts, which we're in right now. In the Central Valley, there is a lot of open declarations for fires. Whether it was directly affecting your business, meaning that you were involved in the fire itself, or was indirectly affected, which your distributors were the ones that were affected, but now are taking a lot longer for the distribution to come to your place of business, or the chain. I know you mentioned logistics chain in the last conversation. So yeah, if it affected your chain, you would also qualify for that. And the best part of this economic injury disaster loan is you can have multiple economic injury disaster loans at the same time. All economic injury disaster loans are at the same rate, meaning that it's 3.75%. The terms are 30 years, and that's for every single one of those. So essentially, you can have multiple, and it's not varied by interest rate. The PPP, as I mentioned, is already out of funding. So, so unfortunately, we can't go through that. But other funding programs, 7A, I know we're talking about logistics, and international trade is something that we're looking forward to this coming year. There are funding programs for international trade as well as logistics. And so it all depends on what type of use you have for the business. Most of our programs are intended for specific uses. 7As, for example, are considered for equipment purchasing, equipment usage, equipment cleaning. 504s are specific for real estate. We do have programs for women-owned veterans, as you mentioned earlier, in the meeting. And we do have funding that we want to push out to those communities as well. So it all depends on what the usage is, I guess.
Well, Victor, I know how to find your office, but how would somebody who's listening in Indiana or somewhere else, Connecticut, New York, anywhere, how does somebody find their local SBA office? Because it's a federal program, but they're going to get their own Victor, right?
Yes. We do have multiple Victors across the nation. We're across the nation in district offices. We do cover large areas. How they would go about this is you can go on to www.sba.gov, and you can type in your zip code and it'll give you the most closest district office to you. And we do travel to you once we get this pandemic off of our chest. We will travel to you, and we also have partners such as the Women's Business Centers in your area, Small Business Development Centers, Veteran Business Outreach Centers, and SCORE mentors that are all part of the SBA that we can help your small business get back on your feet.
Yeah, I love that SCORE program. I went through it in Raleigh probably 2 years ago. It was really incredible. If you graduate, and I have an MBA from a very nice school, and I felt like I learned more at the SBA SCORE than I did in a lot of other places, because you have that opportunity to ask really personal questions. So for the folks who are students at home who are thinking of starting your own business, getting into farming, getting into a restaurant, take these opportunities. They are free. The people at the SBA are super, super nice, and they make things really easy. And overall, if what we can do is demystify how you become successful or what avenues are available to you, then like perfect, great news. I want to ask another question because there's some outstanding funding that affects in particular our farmers that we don't have info on, and I'm hoping you can give me kind of an update on that, on the economic, where is it now? The economic relief for farmers of color. When do you think that application is going to go live? Like, will that go through the USDA or is that going to go through SBA? Will it be a loan? Will it be a grant?
I can tell you more about that.
Oh, Vanessa knows. Okay, tell me about it.
Yeah, there's no application. You're gonna
Okay.
get a letter that says your debt has been forgiven, and it will go through FSA. That's an office inside the Department of Agriculture. What is really important to remember is that you need to make sure your records are up to date in your local FSA office. And that record that needs to be updated is what is called a demographic information sheet to make sure that you are self-identifying as a farmer of color in the FSA record, so they can, when they're like obviously allocating this person's fund, they know that you are entitled to this relief. And that form is the A22047 form. And basically we know it's gonna be happening soon. This is a priority for the office. We think it's gonna be happening as soon as in the next 2 weeks, but it's still right now they're mostly focusing on the data, running the numbers to identify who are the people who are gonna be receiving this debt relief. But definitely, we have collected a lot of resources, and I can drop that in the chat so you can see some of the ways that that's going to be rolling out and how it's going to be moving forward. But you do not need to apply. You just need to make sure your information is up to date so you get that letter. And obviously, if you don't get that letter, when you start hearing that letters are coming out, no letters have been going out yet, so to hang tight. You can take actions to make sure you receive this help you're entitled to.
That is awesome. Cool. So we will include that in the wrap from this, like make sure that your info is updated so that they can reach you. A couple other questions as we're winding down that we have from the audience at home. One of them was, does the consumer packaged food producer qualify for the restaurant revitalization fund? And I think it's no, right, Victor? They have to be a serving food.
Yes, so the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the focus is on the food. You have to have at least 33% or 30%, I think it was 33% towards public sales, but there has to be a food component to it. The bars, the saloons, or any other tasting room, tap room, they would still qualify only if they have that sales directly to the public. So yes, the focus is on food, but it's also focused on the sales to the public directly. Yeah.
Cool. While we're, thinking about these things and how we're going to build connections and whatnot, building a community can be incredibly difficult and it can take a long time. And who are some of the people that y'all might recommend to shout out as like, hey, these are some helpers that you can also go watch their talks, or if they show up on a panel, like make sure you show up to it, for people who are young in their career to sort of like find who the helpers are and find like a good North Star. Like for me, it's Adrian. I put Adrian on every single thing I do because she always has great information. But Vanessa, who is like the North Star for young farmers, maybe?
We definitely trust a lot of one of our partners, Rural Coalition. They're an organization that it has grassroots base all around the United States. And when they do really good work, especially elevating farmers, farm workers, and binational organizations. So there's always someone we are trusting and learning from, especially because they have such a long history of defending farmers of color and especially on civil rights issues. So I will say right now they have been our North Star, and we were definitely fighting. When we were fighting for the provisions for debt relief, they were like, most of our farmers will not be impacted by debt relief, most of our members, but we know mostly rural coalitions farmers will be. So we were like, we're fighting for all those farmers who need this debt relief, even we will not be impacted by that.
Makes sense. Yeah, Judy, who's one of our other friends, a Philly restaurateur, had said once, when you need help, don't look for who you think will help you, look for who also needs help, and they will probably actually be the one to raise you up. So good to think about. Adrian, who's on your board of personal advisors? Like who's doing great work out there right now? Oh, you're muted. Shauna, there you go.
Technology, man, just there's a lot of farmers. I do really depend on social media a lot, and looking at who's doing what. A lot of different types of organizations, especially minority organizations within farming, youth farming also, because it's all about the future.
You're on mute again. Future farming, social media, better tech. If anybody is on this call and they can do a platform where we can do a webinar, I will invest in you. That will be the very next thing that Everything Food does.
Hey, I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, but I really do keep an eye on social media. A lot of people reach out and want to talk. Farmers reach out all the time. I'm in the Midwest, so a lot of farmers I stayed pretty close to in the area. There's only like 65 Black farmers in Wisconsin, so everybody knows everybody. So those are the type of conversations, but especially the younger generation that's very interested in farming or wanting to be about farming. But it's not just the farming aspect, it's also the food aspect, and the connection, because for some reason there is this gap between farm and food, farm and chefs. And we need to connect that. We need to come a lot closer together to really understand where our food comes from. So a lot of different, people are on the rise and getting that knowledge and understanding, like, oh yeah, food comes from farm and we really should be working together as one versus they're just a vendor. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there.
Makes sense. And Josh, as the restaurateur who's connecting with farmers and a big part of your local supply chain and advocate for food rights and food policy, how are you, like, who are your heroes out there? Who's doing great work that folks might want to join? We're going to come back to Josh. Okay, coming back to
sorry,
Josh.
can you hear me?
Oh, there you go.
I gave such a good speech. So I was just going to say, our hero here is a guy named Marty Travis from a place called Down at the Farms. He has a farm called Spence Farm here in Illinois. And he is one of these people that you just can't believe there's enough, he seems to have more hours in the day than any of the rest of us. He brings together, dozens of small family farms from central Illinois, is able to bring their product directly to chefs. He he has these really wonderful emails, blasts he sends out each week where he communicates with chefs, and throughout the entirety of the pandemic was single-handedly supplying lots of us individually and restaurants with food directly from farmers all over the state. So Spence Farm and Marty Travis is an amazing place.
Love it. Let's wrap up by just sort of allowing each of you, instead of me going into 16 more questions, to say, what is the average day like for you? Like, what are the things that are really happening in farm advocacy, in trying to build a nonprofit, in owning a restaurant, what is the average day like, and where do you think there's most opportunity for people looking forward? Maybe Vanessa.
I would say Young Farmers is really unique because we do a lot of federal advocacy, and that's my role. I'm the federal policy director. So my day is from calling the Senate Agricultural Committee, calling the House Agricultural Committee, calling different elected members of Congress, letting them know what young farmers are going through and farmers of color going through to the pandemic, calling USDA, and right now more and more often calling the White House, letting them know how young farmers are reacting to some of their proposals to change the food system, especially related to climate change and so on. But definitely, my advice to anyone is definitely be an advocate. Don't just exist and do your work. Also, you have to be voicing your opinions and how things are impacting you, because that way people like me can tell elected officials what's working, what is not working. So definitely share your story, and be an advocate in any way you can.
Yeah. Adrian, what's working for you right now?
It's a day-to-day battle, and just depends on if I have my chef hat on in the restaurant and working with farmers that way versus reading thousands of emails from different farmers and hearing what they're going through, and trying to find funding or trying to connect them with people in the hospitality industry, talking to USDA, working with America, farms and funding trusts, looking at trust and development and land, and then dealing with my own land itself, and projects that we are having coming up in the future. So it's a day by day process. Zooms are now go-to meetings. It really depends, but always coming home and being a mom and always looking at being a chef. So it's a lot. It's a lot out there. And, I was just thinking, Vanessa and I have to connect, that's
Oh, yeah.
another conversation. So it's all about the network and finding those similarities with people that you meet on the Zooms or, our panels, and then being able to talk. We're stronger in numbers, right? So we have strength in numbers. And especially since a lot of things that we're saying are very similar, can we approach USDA? How can we approach the White House? How can we approach these our state reps and such? So yeah, it's just like I said, it's a day by day thing.
It is what I call the swirl, where sometimes like you don't know how you're going to end up working with somebody, but you just like keep talking with each other until you're like, oh, this is it. This is it. There's no skipping steps. There's no like perfect way to be entirely professional and ideal at meeting people. It's a messy process, but it's fun, and it's what makes it authentic and exciting. And we can have these candid conversations where if nothing else comes out of this, Adrian and Vanessa are going to talk later, and they're going to do some great work, right? Josh, what's working for you guys up there?
Well, my days are currently everything I dreamed about in culinary school. Fixing a broken step, dealing with the bank literally today. My big push has been dealing with our PPP, our first PPP forgiveness. So Adrian, you were right. The anxiety I felt for a year, they gave me this money. Are they going to ask me to pay it back? Has been extremely stressful. I'm hopeful that it'll be forgiven, but trying to understand the ins and outs of all of the various funding and how all the financials and accounting play into what's happening in our business currently. I think there's so many variables in running a small business at all, and certainly running restaurants is an incredibly complicated undertaking. So for anyone thinking about it or out there, I definitely think it is good work, and it's work that gives you direct opportunity to really push to make the world a better place, to make people's lives better. And I think just being open and creative and optimistic that there are better ways to do things, putting energy into understanding your financials, whatever business you're in, so that you're not at the mercy of being surprised. And I think my last thought on that is just that so many restaurants, our margins are so thin, but part of the reason why they're so thin is because we have for so long undervalued our product at the expense of the people working for us, and the food that we're buying. So I think making sure that we're properly charging for the products that we're providing, and so that we can provide for our employees and for the farmers that are supplying us with the food is essential. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the power is in the restaurant. It is in the farm. My grandma used to say skirts only get so short before the maxi dress is back in. We've taken it as far as it could go in the wrong direction. And now we have this chance to kind of reset people's expectations. And I think there is a lot more humanitarianism in the world, despite what you see on CNN or Fox or any of the political news, that people want this better connection to the earth. They want more time to introspect. They want to work from home, right? Because they don't want to just feel like a cog in the capitalist motion. They want to feel connected to the earth and experience it more truly, because we learned this year that life is incredibly precious and it's incredibly fragile. And if you're not enjoying it, then what's the point in it, right? So Victor, coming to you with a last question, speaking of enjoying it, outside of the programs that SBA is funding and executing on right now, are we getting a fourth stimulus check? Have you heard anything about that? Anyone? Is Uncle Biden sending us more coins? Because people need to know.
Can we ask Victor if they're going to add more money to the RRF, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund?
Are they going to refund the revitalization? Are we getting a fourth stimmy? And can you please mark Josh Kulp Honey Butter Fried Chicken PPP as approved?
Yeah, put me on the list there.
Well, great questions. The answer is we don't know. As far as the STIMI, that's completely out of our building. That's up at Capitol Hill. They're the ones that handle those types of decisions. As far as putting more funding into the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, just like PPP, as you've probably seen, it all depends on the usage. But again, the final decision comes from the folks in Capitol Hill. And as far as any other programs, Josh, as far as the PPP, unfortunately, that particular program, we contracted with our banking partners to do. So the banks and the lenders are the ones that do the final decisions and processing for us. As far as the SBA, we do the back end work for the PPP. So the lender provides the funding directly to the borrower. The lender comes to the SBA, sends us the documentation. We work with the lender to give or reimburse the lender the funding, if you will, if it's forgiven. That's how that program works. Unfortunately, we don't do the decisions for the approval or denial for those particular loans. Yeah. As far as any other funding program, again, those decisions are made up at Capitol Hill. We at the SBA or even USD or any other federal agency, we are at the mercy of our elected officials. So when the decision is made out on Capitol Hill or the White House to release any type of funding or new programs, we will definitely let everybody know as soon as we know what the implementation will be. As far as the RRF, I will definitely confirm we are at the forefront of this, just like the EIDL loans. So we do the direct funding, we do the direct processing, and right now we're definitely looking at 14-day turnaround time for the restaurants or anybody in the eligibility field.
So we'll take that first, and then we'll push to make sure that they refund it so that we can get stuff going. Question, maybe you have a cheat code for the folks who did apply for PPP and now they're saying that there's not enough, but we're hearing that there's like 8 million or so that's been set aside for women, veteran, minority-owned businesses. How do you flag your application, or is it just something that's happening? Is there anything that somebody could do who maybe was denied a PPP, but that would qualify as one of those prioritized categories to get it through?
The very first thing I would recommend is contacting the lender that you submitted the application with.
Okay.
A lot of the times the lenders have a specific department dedicated to that particular program. Contact them first. Secondly, if they're not giving you an answer, contact us at the SBA. Give us the information, the application number. If you have it, it's very, very important. Or we will be asking you for your name, business information, so we can try to figure out where it's at, and then contact the lender at that point in time. We can assist you with tracking that information down or a contact information for that lender. So you can definitely give us a call and we'll be able to assist you with that. Lastly, if you're not getting anybody here locally at the district office from where you're at, contact the SBA main line, especially the disaster center. they can definitely provide that assistance for you. There is no cheat code, unfortunately, when it comes to federal funding. We have to keep everybody on the same in the same single file line.
I think it's important to at least identify for folks that you're wanting. If you did get, you know, a notice after you applied for PPP, especially if you applied recently, that said that they ran out, that you want to contact whoever the lender was that you were applying to. If they can't help you, then you're going to the SBA with your application number. Do not stop advocating for yourself until they say it's completely exhausted. So don't give up yet. There may still be a chance that, especially if you're a woman-owned business, you'll be able to get it through. And get
yes,
that
and one
funding.
thing, if I may add to that, if
Yeah.
you're looking to be certified as a women-owned business, it is free. It doesn't cost you anything. It just takes some time to do. And we can definitely assist your business getting certified as a women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned.
Great.
Any type of certifications that we have out there, we can definitely help you with that, and it doesn't cost you a dime. But those certifications go a very long way.
Yes, we love that. So we're going to do that. And then, you know, we had a great conversation today just about how people use their money before, what's it kind of looking like, who's advocating, where things may be coming from, certainly more detail on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. I'm going to be sending out a note to everybody who attended this and anybody else who had signed up who wasn't able to make it, that'll have links to these speakers' platforms where you can get more information from them, join their causes. In addition, you'll be able to learn about the things that are going on with Everything Food and our program through Food Pharmacy, which is connecting fresh farm produce boxes from minority and women-owned farms to chronically ill patients. We also have a program that is rolling out medically tailored meals for the same thing, because we know that if we can shift the perception on how the government is buying or how insurance is buying or any of these conglomerates of billions of dollars that are floating around, and we can get them to invest in trusting people to buy the food for themselves to better their health and better their community, that's going to go a lot farther than maybe subsidizing corn has gone in the last 20 years. Like, that was maybe a great idea for a while, and certainly that worked out. Maybe we give someone else a chance. Maybe we work with HUD a little bit and we say, why don't we give people who are on housing security more money in their SNAP? Those are all things that the average citizen and certainly young people are working towards right now to make this world a more equitable and delicious place. I'm so grateful to our panelists today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to chat with us. We'll be sending out a ton more information. Hopefully y'all at home found this to be useful. If you have any more questions, you can always email us through the link that you registered for this webinar. And I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.